Recording for YouTube. There we go. Hey, YouTube. Whoa, wild. Oh, we can't swear in the first 2 minutes because that's going to upset the YouTube algorithm. Don't forget to like and subscribe and thank today's sponsor, uh, Durex condoms. I don't know. Real question is why you didn't do it sooner. Because it's a bot account. But yeah, either way, we're going to react to Tim Cain, high-level design direction. Let's go.
It's me, Tim.
No, wait, hold on. I want you to say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about high-level design direction.
Yeah.
This is something that the game director, creative director, whatever it's called on your project, this is probably the single most important task that the person in this role does. I'm going to talk about it, but it's also something that I think is misunderstood or underestimated by a lot of people who aren't in the role and by people who first step into the role.
Okay. I will say what I feel about high-level game design, and we'll see if Tim has the same idea, or if he disagrees with it, or maybe can teach us something new about high-level game design. So I'm just gonna say that I view it as, because maybe he's got a different way of seeing it, right? So I view high-level game design as really the ideas, the rough direction of where we want to go, and the reasons we want to have it, right? So when you create your game pillars, when you are thinking of what your game is going to achieve, when today we're talking about the puzzles for the submarine game, right? It being based on actions and systems within the submarine itself, that is the high level design. The low level design, and when you're actually creating the system, is when you are going deeper and saying, okay, well, how does this work? How does the player interact with that? What is the data behind that? How do we balance it? How does this interact with other systems, right? So if you're saying, okay, I want a game like Stardew Valley, but you're set in a post-apocalyptic world, and instead of growing food, you grow gun parts, and you combine those gun parts to create your own guns that you can sell to vendors to fulfill requests, or to take into the wasteland to gather materials, and you can use those guns yourself, right? That is high-level design, right? We're going to have a farm, you're going to grow, you're going to have seasons, you're going to have weather. Rain in a farming sim is usually very good. It's desirable, but in this case, it's going to rust your weapons. So you want to have like umbrellas that you can put up to protect your guns while they're growing, your gun parts. That's all high-level design. That doesn't talk about how it looks. That doesn't talk about how the player interacts with it. It doesn't tell about how it's balanced or anything like that. I had an eye-opening experience while hearing a dude make a GDD for his game, and didn't think about half the things he needs, and it turned into a mess with way too many systems that didn't interlock or helping, and sometimes flat out go against one another. Yeah, that's really common. That's really common. I've worked with game designers that have that problem. It's really important just to think of how does this all fit together, and then to prototype it, right? Because that is testing your high-level design. We don't care in Colden Chronicles if something is balanced right now. Not unless balance is a crucial part to making that system work, right? Whereas with what's a good example? Ghost of Tsushima, actually, is actually a good example where the amount of damage that the sword does is very crucial to making the katana and the combat in that game feel deadly, right? So you don't just want bullet spongy enemies, because then you don't feel like you're actually playing a lethal samurai. So for example, Vampire Survivors, yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, you want those to at least have some rough level of balance, because the challenge of the waves and being able to beat them is part of that experience. But as with Cauldron Chronicles, like, yeah, I can just cheat at all the ingredients because that isn't really part of what we're doing right now or what we're testing. The alchemy system works whether or not the player has it all or not. Although you could make an argument that you want to have the cheating in the ingredients takes away from the experience of processing them, so you want to be careful that when you're cheating the ingredients that you are not experiencing the full alchemy system. That's a fair criticism. But for testing certain things, we don't need it to be balanced, right? Or we don't need it to be very balanced. I'm getting off track either way. For me, high level design is here's what we want in the game, here's how they work together, and here's how they serve the pillars and the core loop, right? And anything deeper than that is going into low level design, which is, I can't give you an example right now, like physical, because all the documents I make for other games are considered. Actually, I do know one I can give you. I absolutely know one. Where can I find that? My mod. I have a guide. There should be some spreadsheets somewhere. Actually, this is low level design numbers, how things are balanced, how much damage something does, and exactly what kind of effects it does. The abomination has a this rake skill, right? Because he's a beast. Me saying I want this character to have a skill where he rakes his claws against an enemy, that's high level. Well, okay, how much accuracy, how much damage does it do, what effects does it does? These are low level design, right? Sometimes testing makes the mechanics seem uninteresting until balanced. Yeah, it does, to provide a counterpoint, especially for games that rely on battle or survival. Yeah, I would absolutely say so. And the game designer needs to know when something feels bad because it's poorly balanced and when something feels bad because it is just bad, right? It's like not designed well. There is a very clear distinction between those two. So that's a physical example of some of that stuff. Or saying, okay, when the player presses this button, the window pops up. There's a 2-second delay where we fade to black before opening up the window. Again, that's all low level design.
And what I mean by high level design direction is you basically have to watch everything going into the game. Everything. System mechanics, story elements, quests, maps.
Yeah, it's the exact same reason why a lot of lead game designers become, or I should say senior game designers either become lead or they become producer, and there's a lot of overlap. And there's a lot of designers who become producers within their own studio as well. So they do design and production, and it's because both roles of lead design and producer are just up in everybody's shit all the time, because you need to make sure that it's meeting the expected standard and setting the specific goals that you have for your game's direction and your pillars.
Dialogue, NPCs, the names of things, lore text, everything, to make sure it all fits. And that high level, whatever view, whatever, your take on your vision of this game should be, all that stuff has to fit and serve that vision. Now, this sounds almost like, well, that's very egotistical. And I get a lot of people say this. The biggest issue game directors run into when they do this is people who get mad at them for being egotistical dictators. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, and the problem is that it attracts. It's a job that does attract egotistical dictators, unfortunately. And I've worked for some of them. I have been one of them before. There is a big difference between defending something that you know is part of the core vision and that you don't want to compromise on, and a difference between saying, do it like this because I asked, right? You need to be able to explain that. You need to be a team player and that your vision is not always the best vision. You can hear modifiers to that, right? Like, of course, Cauldron Chronicles is always going to be an alchemy game. I'm not going to have somebody convince me not to make it an alchemy game, because at that point, it is not Cauldron Chronicles anymore. It is something else. But that we can say, okay, well, here is what I envisioned as the potion game. Okay, well, I have this different idea for how we can make it better. And I shouldn't defend the original idea just because it was mine and it was original, but I should defend it because at least we have this baseline. So I'm saying, okay, well, this accomplishes these goals. So let's test your idea and see if it accomplishes the same goals, or if it, doesn't fulfill something that we wanted to have proper, which I would say then leads into what I try to do is called goal-oriented design, right? Where, okay, we have the system we want. What does it need to accomplish? Those are our goals. So potion combat, for instance, I can read some of the goals that we have for that. I posted those somewhere. Yeah. No, that's not it. Where is it? Here's it is. So I want the combat to be accessible but not shallow. I don't mind the player brute forcing standard enemies. I would like enemies to have mechanical weaknesses that must be overcome by countering them with effects. I would like the player to use as few potions as possible to dispatch an enemy, but for that not to mean that enemies only have one weakness or line of defense that needs to be overcome. I want effects to have multiple uses. For combat, drinking by the player, traversal and exploration, puzzle solving, and NPC commissions. I would like effects to have some interplay and potential for combination. And I would like effects to interact with the environment and the environment to interact with effects. So these are the goals I set, and there are potentially an infinite number of ways to solve those goals and have different, outcome for the player. So this is my high level design, and then we take it a bit more low level and we say, okay, how can we create a system that accomplishes this? Then we jump into the engine. How can we prototype this? And then we see if it actually meets those goals, or even if it does meet those goals, is it fun, right? Because that is the number one thing that you want to test. So I'm going to need so many testers before I release my game. A good resource management system is super important to my main game loop. It's true. Can't give hand up, but still to be fair. Need to give a purpose to collecting the berries that will close the loop. That's my next step. I already have something in mind. I just need to figure out how to do it in an engine. I look forward to seeing it. So, yeah, that was my thought. I like to go in for goals, and I agree that a lot of new people will see lead designers, or may even see me as like a dictator of sorts. But I mean, number one, it's my vision, right? Number two, I kind of have this goal of what this game is supposed to look like, and by just randomly throwing in wild ideas, that doesn't mean that it's going to make that vision better. It's something, you need to think on it. You need to sit on it and say, well, that wouldn't help accomplish this thing or this thing. And that's why we have pillars. That's why we have a core loop, so that we can look at it and say, well, this is what we expect to be really enjoyable. This is what we prototype it as enjoyable. They seem to align. So anything that we add on top of that needs to fit within this loop, or else we're changing the gameplay loop, or else we're changing the pillars a bit. If we end up saying that, well, fishing is now more important than alchemy, well, okay, does that make the game more fun? And if so, well, maybe we need to, reconfigure our pillars a bit, or make a different game entirely, right? I mean, not that that's going to happen, but theoretically, things like that do happen.
Realizing that they're trying to serve something higher than a particular person's work.
Yes.
I would recommend, this video is going to have a lot of video references in it. I would recommend watching my videos on how to be a good game director. And just to be clear, you probably want to watch all my nuance videos again as well. They're listed.
It's a communications job. That's what I tell people. Being a game designer is a communications job. That's all you're doing. That's not all you're doing, but you're taking ideas, you are communicating them on paper, through video, through diagrams, flow charts, on whiteboards, pictures, anything. It's communicating ideas so that people with expertise on how to build certain things can work together to build the thing according to the vision. You say, I want my game to have guns that fire lasers. Well, now you need to build high level design. Everybody understands high level design. My game has guns that shoot lasers, right? But now, how many different visions of guns that shoot lasers can you think of? How does it fit within the theme of the game? You know, is it a single round gun? Is it a rifle? It's high level design is easy. Gun shoots lasers, kills enemies. Now the low level design is, well, how does that gun look? How does it sound? How does the player obtain it? How is it balanced? How many rounds does it fire? What happens to enemies that are killed by lasers? Like in Fallout, you know, they get vaporized, right? Some of the time. So it's like you need to go even deeper and then communicate all of these important bits of information to every team member, to your sound designers, to your 3D artists, to your 2D artists if you have icons within your inventory, to your UI designer if maybe something else different gets displayed when you select one of these, right? You'll need to talk to your systems designer to let them know how you want this to be balanced. I'm sure I'm missing somebody within that too. Effects artist, because now you have a new visual effect in the game. All of these things, right, are crucial to making just a fucking laser pistol in your RPG game. Well, the games changed their core mechanics because they found out that it was better gameplay. Yes, but they should do it early. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that too late, because then then you end up with Dragon Age Veilguard, where the game has just kind of like undergone design overhaul so many times that it's now lost its original identity and probably has pillars that are way different from what the original Dragon Age games were supposed to be representing. And now people who liked original Dragon Age games are like, this is not my series anymore. It's just, it has the name, but it's a totally different game. End up with Diablo 3 and Overwatch. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why pillars are important and why you need to identify what, especially with sequels, what gives that brand identity. What do people associate when they think Borderlands, right? And how do we double down on that? And if you see that sequels are going poorly, like Borderlands 3, in my opinion, was pretty shit. What made that shit that we can fix to make Borderlands 4 even better? Hint: don't do fucking streamer villains, please. It's cringy and it was shit. The gunplay was good in Borderlands 3. Gunplay was good. Story, not so great.
Blow, because I want to make clear what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about designers doing bad work and the game director has to be watching for that. I'm talking about designers doing work that doesn't fit within what you're trying to create.
Yes, that's true.
And having to have it changed or removed. And it's really difficult to explain. And based on some comments of some videos I've done, I think a lot of people have misunderstood that that's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to dive into both Fallout 2 and WildStar a little more. I don't really want to, because I'm positive people will misunderstand me again, but I'm trying to be really clear. And also for WildStar, a different reason, I still have some PTSD over that. I don't like thinking about it. I don't even like looking at my notes. I have some very clear notes.
I can understand that.
My notes from that area are the most extensive from that era.
I can understand, because, for me, Tim Cain is somebody who's done this his whole life out of an intense passion, like me. And yeah, I feel the exact same way thinking about some things that didn't go well because of some bad decisions, either by myself or by other people who I didn't have control over. And yeah, you do get some PTSD. I also agree that people just don't understand it. I mean, there's a great video by Carrie Patel, who I think she's now the lead. I think she's the creative director of, it's not Avowed, right? The game that Obsidian's making, the RPG. Yeah, it's Avowed. Okay, so she is now the creative director. Back when she gave the talk on GDC, she was a producer, and she gave a talk about um, more ethical ways of developing games to prevent people from burning out and from being rewarded for overwork. So it was just basically about how to treat employees better. A very good talk, by the way. And people were in the comments saying, well, this is why Obsidian's games are not good anymore. It's like you're equating developers not crunching and overworking themselves with games being bad. What? I mean, like, people. There's a lot of topics that gamers don't often understand when it comes to game development and why certain decisions are made. And I get it. Like, it's not your requirement, right? I don't need to know how a kitchen is being run, and I just don't like that my food is taking so long to come out to me, right? So, but though I do think that explaining some of these phenomenons with game development and some of the reasons why passionate people are forced to make bad things or accidentally make bad things, it can happen just from an early decision that wasn't tested very well or wasn't countered early enough, and you just have to double down on it because now you're building on top of that shit system, and every day that goes by it becomes more and more work in order to replace that initial bad decision to fix all of the ballooning things that came out of it, right? And I had this case in the train game that I worked on. I anticipated that players would prefer a simpler signaling system because we were aiming for a casual audience. Well, as it turned out, the audience wasn't as casual as we thought it would be, and the signaling system wasn't as in depth, and it didn't work as well as we had initially intended it to be. But by the time that we realized that, it was way too late to change it, and we were just working on new systems. So it's like it just kind of it blew out of control because we didn't really test it or get players onto it early enough. And it just is what it is. It sucked, but we learned the lesson from that. One thing I hate about Blizzard, they will change their game at the end and not say a thing. The stuff they said about the game, they remove it from the internet. Yeah, I mean, I see that all the time with AAA. It's so with Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk was tagged as an RPG before it came out on Steam, and then when it came out on Steam, they removed the RPG tag. So, things happen. No Man's Sky had a sticker over the multiplayer aspect. You guys ever see that? No Man's Sky multiplayer sticker. This one? They had a sticker over the multiplayer aspect. So yeah, things happen, and just so you know, when a game goes gold and when they make box art, you don't have very much time left in development. Very little time left, right? Because it's very expensive to distribute and store games, physical copies. So by the time they had this ready, had them printed and made, and put the games inside them, at most they probably only had a few months left of development. At most. So the fact that they were in deep production, well within their beta before release, and removed multiplayer is astounding. And that to me seems like they didn't test it enough, or they thought they could add it and get away with it, but then it was too buggy, so they had to remove it. And that's scary. That's the kind of shit that players don't see. They get lied to, and then the game releases, and it's not what the game that they thought they were buying, right? We're getting really off topic with high level design direction, but either way, it's really important that you have a good design director, somebody in charge who can defend but be open to hearing things, is good at communicating, can defer to expertise where it's needed, and knows how to just stick by the core pillars without moving an inch. If something needs to be defended because you know that it's going to be better for the players, they need to be able to do that.
Most extensive I've ever taken. I don't like looking at them though. They just bring up a lot of bad memories and arguments and people angry at other people. So let's take a quick look though at Fallout 2 and at WildStar, because they both illustrate what I'm trying to talk about here. So when I look at Fallout 2, my biggest problem with it isn't that I don't think it's got very good design. I think it has really good design. My problem is I see different areas of the game that do not match up tonally. And I see too much over the top pop culture referencing, fourth wall breaking humor. Now, I've talked about this in my videos. You see it in my video below about why I left Fallout 2. But what I want to make clear is I'm not saying that designers on that game were bad designers. In fact, many of them were the designers from the first one. So I've praised them. You know they're good. So what happened in my mind? What happened with Fallout 2? I think the single
direction issue.
Biggest point of failure is that there was not a cohesive high-level design direction. Basically, the designers were allowed to do whatever they wanted in their areas. And this caused the game to not only feel different than the first one, but parts of the game feel different than other parts of the game. In fact, when you play the game, it often feels like you do one area and you do all of it, and then you're breadcrumbed onto the next area, which then is its totally new, self-contained area. And you do things there until you're breadcrumbed onto the next area. And that's probably because that's how it was done. That's how it was created. The designers were given kind of free reign over their own area, and so they did everything they wanted to do. And the only caveat was, okay, at the end of your area, push the player on to the next area of the game. Now, I've talked a lot about Fallout 1, and I've talked about stuff I had removed or changed in it. And that wasn't me trying to be a gatekeeper, although I will point out, gatekeeper is part of the duty of a game director.
Yes, it
is.
is.
What you're being paid to do. People don't like it. People get mad at you, you egotistical dictator, you.
Yep.
But it's what you're there to do.
There are different ways to do it, right? And I'm not saying that I do it perfectly all the time. In fact, sometimes I can come off as way too defensive and stuck in the mud. But, I do it for that reason, is because I just know that this is a better option. And it's sometimes hard to explain in the moment why you intuitively know that. I'm a pretty intuitive designer, and I just I do things based on feel and based on my experience with other games, or watching people play other games, or watching Twitch chat respond to other games, right? It's just a buildup of that experience, and sometimes I'm like, trust me, I know this is going to be better for this. And then later I'll have to come in with like, okay, so the reason I said that is because this, and this, and I was thinking that it would lead to this, right? But there are just better ways of communicating that. And if anything, I think a design director, if in the moment knows that they're in that situation, a good response is just, I'll think about it and I'm going to get back to you about it. That way you have time to process it and then return your answer, right? You don't want to shut people on your team down. You don't want to say, that's terrible, your idea sucks, let me go back to work, right? Because now that person, I guarantee, will never come to tell you about an idea that they have ever again. And why should they? So you more so want to approach it from a perspective of, that sounds pretty cool, but I don't think it fits with our pillars here. That like the tone is off. I think it's a bit too humorous for this character. But maybe there's a character we can write where doing something like this would be a much better fit. Or at the very least, write that idea down and let's see if we can make a game in the future that we can do that with. Something a bit less serious, right? What's a player's hell to do when someone makes a game? They're like, yeah, we'll have it, but when they find out what it requires, yeah, it's like, so just, for me, it's like, Golden Chronicles will not have multiplayer because I don't know how to design for it. I've never done that. I think Golden Chronicles already is pushing myself in areas of design that I've never done before, and I'd rather focus on making those good so that maybe my next game I can take multiplayer on as a challenge. And it really just does add a significant amount to budget, and I don't know if it's actually going to be good for the game. I don't think multiplayer would make every game better. There are no bad ideas and there are no bad questions. Yeah, they're just like there's ideas that don't fit for this game. Like Cauldron Chronicles, great, cool idea. And most 99% of ideas in the world are not going to fit within this game. And that is exactly, he's right. Tim Kane's right. You have to be a gatekeeper. You have to know, okay, cool idea. I don't know if it can work. But the thing is, you don't want to shut down the idea because it can spark, right? It can be a conversation. It's like, okay, well, maybe that doesn't work, but what if we had the character doing this and this, which is kind of similar to what you're saying, but might fit the goal well? Okay, well, I like that idea, but I do still want to push it in this direction. And it's like, keep the conversation going. A question, an idea is a conversation starter, and let it be that. Don't let it be a wall that you have to put up to prevent people from talking to you. Because at the time where you are a designer or you're a director and people don't want to tell you their ideas because of how you act, you are a dictator. And nobody likes working with you, and most of those people will either say that to the owner or they will just leave the team, either immediately or once the game's done. And you'll have a super high turnover rate in your company. I've been there. I've done that. It sucks. And a lot of good, people that I worked with and friends, they left the company and went somewhere else where they were much better treated. And I can't blame them. Okay, moving on. Maybe be like, yes, we can do that one idea we can do right here and it'll make this part better. Yeah, it really could. You're very right. It absolutely could be. And they don't want to talk to you because they'll feel like you'll just shut down all of their ideas. You don't even want to have a conversation. You've immediately said their idea is lesser because you are in a higher position or you have more authority or experience on the matter. And that's definitely not true. Anybody can have a good idea. Ideas are meaningless or worthless, let's say. They're not meaningless, but they're worthless.
Things I removed from Fallout 1, including the talking raccoon race, the Recree, or the Terminator-style robots. I've also talked about a character I asked to be rewritten, and Scott Benny wrote it. Scott Benny was a great narrative designer, but there was a character that he wrote that had Tourette's, that basically just every other word out of his mouth was a swear word. And I was just like, I don't think this fits. I can think of a lot of reasons this character would no longer be alive.
You're right.
And I asked him to rewrite it.
That's a good point.
It wasn't because the Recree or the Terminator robots or that character were bad. It's their design
didn't
fit the high-level vision of Fallout 1. The only thing I can imagine, if you want to pull back and say, what is this like? Imagine a book written by really good writers, but every chapter is written by a different writer. If you think for a second that book won't need a good editor, you're wrong.
The Bible. No, but he's very right. Like, because nobody is properly communicating how they go from one part to another. He's 100% right. You need an overall vision for what it goes. It's the exact reason you have a GDD. It's the exact reason you create a level design document as a Bible in this case of how you make the levels in your game, right? So that there are standards, that all the level designers on the team know that there shouldn't be more than 5 of this certain specific gameplay item in the level. And that in this level is earlier in the game, so this needs to be defended by, there need to be fewer defenses than in later levels where the enemies are going to have more defenses set up because it makes the challenge harder for the player, right? So all of this goes into that, and if you don't have that, you just have designers working on levels and just throwing in whatever they think works. And like he said, he perfectly said it. Everything will feel tonally different and like you're stepping into a completely different game in each level that you enter. And that's most of the time not a good idea.
And if you think that some of those really fantastic writers won't have that editor going back to them and saying, I need you to rewrite this, it might be because you say something that contradicts stuff in other
Yeah.
chapters. It may be that the tone of your chapter doesn't fit all the other chapters. It's not that it's bad, it's you're trying to create this cohesive whole. And a really good, excellent, well designed thing may not fit.
Yep.
And it has to be changed.
Yep. I always say, like, making a game, and this is not a crazy high intelligence analogy, but making a game is like a soup. You can take the best ingredients and put them in a pot and get a soup that tastes like shit, right? It's about the combination of ingredients, and sometimes the simpler ingredients that are just okay can come together and make something beautiful, right? So it's about carefully determining what you want in that soup, in what order and in what quantity, and with how much care put behind, preparing that ingredient, if we want to say it that way, right? Which are your pillars. Like, well, the most important part of a potato soup is the potatoes. So let's make sure we put a lot of care into our potatoes. Or an onion soup, it's like, this is the core of it. Let's make sure the core is really, really, really good. And then we can experiment with different flavors to add to it, different ingredients, and see if we can make something that it's a bit more unique. So you can say, like, okay, well, onion soups taste like any other onion soup, but they have different, tiny subtleties in their flavors. That's like onion soup is the genre. The different subtle flavors are the different types of games within that genre. A lot of companies, they have idea spamming sessions and they list all of them, and they tend to, like, these are good, but we need better. Try to think more outside the box, but they keep a list of all ideas. I've noticed, unfortunately, in my experience being a game designer, if you have a place, it's important to have a place for people to put ideas, but most people won't do it because they don't have the time. Or when they think of something, they'll just message you directly. So it's more of like a psychological way of saying, well, I'm open to ideas, but most people never use the proper channel for it, right? So that's why I really like working in an office as a designer, where I can, like, go out to lunch with people and just casually talk about the game or a system that I'm thinking about. Because when they have a moment to not think about their work and just talk about something that's outside of their area, like, oh, design, design of the game. People love to talk about the design of the game and their ideas for how to make it better, right? So by just going out with, like, people during lunch and just talking to them about a system, they always have ideas of how to make it better. How's it going to work? Maybe it can work like this. And that's beautiful. I love that. It's great. And it's very helpful. And things like remote work and during COVID and shit, they were horrible for game design because I couldn't catch people in those off the cusp, casual moments. Everybody was working, and then they go to eat lunch on their own. They wouldn't, they don't eat lunch with anybody. They're just at home, and then they come back and work. And trying to just engage with them casually about something and ask their idea or their opinions, it was nearly impossible. I don't even know what Tim Cain was talking about at this point, but either way, I went off on a tangent, and there's my idea of the tangent.
So let me talk briefly about Wildstar, despite me not wanting to, because I want you to go back and watch that video, because I've had people say, oh, I can't believe you thought those designers were bad designers, the ones who got laid off. First of all, I never said that. Second, I kind of implied the opposite, where I said that at the very beginning of the video, I worked with some of the best artists, designers, and programmers ever in my career at Wildstar, and I'm including those guys. It was strange to us that they all got laid off. In fact, I didn't know that was going to happen, and it reminded me of when the original art director got laid off. I had no idea. One day, he just wasn't there anymore. You would think me as a programming director would be in that loop. I was not. That's happened, insane. Just to remind everybody, is after 3 years of Wildstar, the NCSoft Austin and NCSoft Seoul came to the office to look at the game. And every director had intensive questions asked of them. I spent hours with one of the top programming directors from Seoul, and he was asking me really detailed questions about the code, especially the engine. There were several times, especially when it was about graphics or networking, that I said, "Do you want me to go get the programmer who did that? He can answer your question in far more detail." And he'd go, "No, no, no, I want you to answer." What I didn't realize then, that I realized later, was that I was being tested. I was being questioned. They wanted to know what was going on, that they'd spent 3 years and a lot of money, and the game wasn't coming together. And they wanted to know why.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's gotta suck, by the way, being in that position on that day. That's gotta be a really fucking stressful day. Uh, I do not feel any sort of jealousy over that experience, but it makes sense, and it's not a bad idea. I mean, just like, hey, no, you tell me. You are the director. You should know this thing, right? I think it's a fair choice. Like, we want to know who here is responsible for the game being in the state that it's in. Is it everybody? Is it specific directors? And that is usually the problem. It's like it's usually one or two specific directors or people in high positions that are actively making this a game not turn out very well, right? Or just a combination of bad decisions early on. There's so many different ways that a game can get fucked up from idea to release, right? And it's never just one thing. It's never when there's a game that's super buggy that means that the programmers are bad at their jobs. It could mean anything. It could mean that they didn't have enough time to fix the bugs. It could mean that QA wasn't reporting bugs properly, or that they had built systems that weren't very stable and they needed to to refactor something, or the designers are implementing data improperly in ways that the systems can't handle. So it's just, there's any number of problems that go on, or the engine itself is just terrible, right? Like Stalker, great games. Their engine, the X-Ray engine, sucks ass, which is why they're not using it anymore to make Stalker 2. And that doesn't mean that the game idea is bad, or that the programmers didn't work their ass off trying to make it run well. Just like sometimes you have bad tools, right? You can have the greatest plumber in the world and give him the worst tools, and he may not be able to do the job. Please continue, Tim.
The conclusion they reached was the code engine looked good, the art looked good, and both of them were cohesive. In other words, the game engine had a lot of features that were planning to be used. The art all looked like it belonged in the same game. The design, not so much. So again, let me stress, this wasn't because the individual designers were bad. I believe that the direction they were getting, the vision, wasn't very coherent. Now, I expected to have the design directors to be replaced. I didn't even expect them to be let go. I mean, they were founders of Carbine. I certainly didn't think that all but one of the designers would be let go. We found that out later.
All but one of the designers was let go. That's crazy. I've never heard of stories of WildStar before. I played WildStar. I enjoyed WildStar. Did it feel like it had some cohesion issues? Yeah, looking back at it now, I can definitely feel that. But it was still like, that was a very promising MMO that just kind of fell apart and then just went dead, right? That's wild, dude. All but one designer just let go. Wow.
I was given no insight into the process, the same as when the original art director was let go. And it was surprising, and it underscores a lot of what happened at Carbine. Things were compartmentalized. Information was compartmentalized. Probably the number one
It's a terrible
amount
thing.
of feedback, and I don't like looking at the comment section of that video either, my WildStar video. But looking at it, the number one feedback I seem to get from people who also work there is they had no idea what was happening to me as design director. The same way I didn't know what was happening with the original design group. There wasn't a lot of knowledge that you got, a lot of insight you got into the other departments. And when they were let go, the first reaction I had was, do you know how much knowledge we just lost?
Yep.
There's These were designers who had an intimate knowledge of the game
Yeah.
engine and how our tools work.
Yeah, I mean that's something that people don't consider often is this person was there from assumedly the start, right? Some of these designers, they know exactly how to manipulate the systems. If they were just being given some poor direction, that doesn't make them bad designers. It just means that what they were doing was not really cohesive to the core vision. So if they got a proper cohesive direction given to them, well, they are the best ones to be able to know how to manipulate the engine and create the content. Now you're going to have to bring in new designers that know nothing about that and will have to learn its quirks from the start. And, it's like you're adding massive development delays because they're going to have to learn it. The ability to create things that are similar to what came before are going to be different because you have different people working on it, especially with design, right? That's terrible. Yeah, I mean, oh god, that sucks. I've kind of been in that situation though with the compartmentalized communication. It's a very, 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 very terrible thing. Just especially when you're working remote, it's way harder than it used to be when you were working in the same office. You need to communicate. Don't send things over privately. Put them in a public channel. If it's not relevant to somebody, they will just ignore it. But if it is relevant to somebody that you didn't know it was relevant to, now they can see it and they can jump in. You can have that conversation.
And that was a lot to be lost. That was a huge setback. But to just reiterate what I'm saying, it wasn't their fault. I think there was no high level vision that had gelled enough to make NCSoft Austin and NCSoft Seoul happy. That isn't me. That isn't feedback from me. That was feedback from them. So I don't know exactly what prompted their decision, but that's what they decided to do. And then that made me think of Outer Worlds. A lot of what I did in that game was very high level guidance. That's why a lot of people said, "Oh, did you do that?" No, I didn't actually do that. I didn't write those system mechanics. I didn't create the parameters for them. I didn't balance that. I didn't do that. It was very high level. I talked at one point in a video about in playtesting the Outer Worlds about how much I played the game. I played it like 16, 19 times. I know it was well over a dozen with wildly different characters because I wanted to see how it worked. I wanted to look at narrative design. I wanted to see, am I being pushed in one direction? Am I being told one path in the game is right and other ones are wrong? It's hard to tell that from reading it, but when you play it, it really comes out. I wanted to look at system mechanics. I wanted to make a build that was strong in some area. And was the game too hard with that build? Was it too easy? And I did discover that there were areas in the game, there were maps that were too hard. And I thought the map needed to be changed. Now, if the entire game had been too hard with a build, I would have wanted to change the system mechanic. It didn't mean that map was bad, and it didn't mean the mechanic was bad. It meant they didn't go together,
Yeah.
and you have to decide what to do. Now, did I get to review everything? No. The game did ship with imbalances, especially like item imbalances and economic imbalances. But what a good design director, a good game director tries to do is look at all those things from a high level and get them fixed. That's kind of my TLDW for this video, is a good game director or design director, whatever they're called. A big chunk of what they do is this high level design direction. If you don't do it, the game suffers. And it isn't the fault of the team the team that's doing the work. They can't be expected to coordinate that work among themselves. Somebody needs to be the person who steps back and says, how does all this stuff fit together?
Yeah.
Now that's hard to do.
It's very
hard.
hard.
It's a really hard job. And unless you've done it, I don't think you entirely understand how hard it is. No matter what decision you make, people will get mad at you. They think you're calling their work bad. You're not. You're just saying, hey, I've got all this work that's a certain tone and yours is a completely different tone. Rather than redo 80% of the game to match you, you're going to redo the 20% of the game to match that. The game will be better for it. These decisions you make the game better. You are going to make some people angry. It is a very hard set of decisions to make. It's hard to figure out what is wrong. You play the game and you have to step back and go, what is wrong here? Why am I frustrated? Why am I not liking
Yep.
this? You may even enjoy it, and then afterwards you realize, oh shoot, I did like that, but I was really pushed in one direction, which is not one of our design pillars. So,
Yeah, and I've kind of gotten in hot water for stating some of that, where I've been in a position where I'm trying to call out these red flags and people, and sometimes it's my own work, right? Which is why I've mentioned on the channel before why a game designer should be the first person to speak poorly about their own work. It's opening the door, and it's really hard for other people to criticize you when you are in a position often of leadership, right? Especially if you are like a lead game designer or a design director. A lot of juniors will feel uncomfortable speaking poorly about the game to you because they could lose their job. They can be easily replaced. It's much easier to replace a junior designer than it is to replace a design director. Much easier. And so as design director, you want to be the first person to criticize your own work and say, look, dude, I called it wrong. This system is shit. It's terrible. We need to replace it. Here are some ideas. Does anyone have any other ideas that we can do for this? We're going to be doing that with Golden Chronicles, of course, too, where it's like, nah, dude, flavor sucks. I don't like how it's done right now. Let's try to find a different way to do it. Or our NPCs, right? Like, tonally, he's mentioning characters and tones. We need to find what kind of tone do we want to achieve and make sure that that's directed to our narrative lead, who's going to be hiring writers, right? So that he knows exactly what I want to achieve with characters. And we've talked about that. I will only hire a narrative designer who understands the vision for our characters. I'm going to pick your brain a bit after this vid. Is it about high-level design direction, or is it something else? Either way, you just message me after the video, and I'll probably be home. Oh, it's just something else? Okay. Was it about like that meeting you had? I don't know what it was. We'll figure it out. Either way, I want to finish up the video, and yeah, I'm about to end. So, do you want to do it on stream, or do you want to do it off stream? Okay, so just send it to me on Discord then. And yeah, we'll finish up with this. Or here in chat. Either way.
I think that high-level design direction that the game director does is simultaneously one of the hardest things that person has to do, and at the same time, the most misunderstood part of the role.
Yes.
And a role that I see go awry frequently. I've seen it in my career. I've also played games, and I went, I don't think they had a cohesive vision for this game. Doesn't mean, again, the designers were bad. It meant a lot of stuff went in this game that probably shouldn't have been there. And anyway, that's what I hope that when you look at some of my older videos, especially the ones I link below, you look at it from that point of view. I'm really complaining about vision, not actual work.
He's right, and I think for a lot of gamers, there's a black box around game dev, right? That when game is wrong, a game developer knows that it could be any one of a million things. A gamer doesn't know what the fuck went wrong. It's just, I thought I was buying this game, it's not this game, or I bought this game, it runs like shit, there's bugs everywhere. Game is shit, developers are shit, right? And I don't blame them. Like, if they don't know what's wrong, it's like if you go to a restaurant, you get a bad dish, you're like, dude, these chefs don't know what the fuck they're doing. This dish tastes like ass. And it could just be like, well, maybe it was specifically the saucier, or maybe it was the ingredients that they bought, or there was a malfunction. You never know. Like, you just don't know what caused the problem that your game is shit. Either way, this was great. I'm gonna upload this on YouTube, and then we can finish off the stream. So yeah, thank you for watching that reaction. Hope I can get some more up for these.